Okay, so in this video, I'm going to quickly talk about the basics of the currency market. So I'll start with the terminology, and that makes up quite a lot of this video. So currency pairs are always quoted as two adjacent three-letter symbols. So when you're talking about currency, you can't really talk about currency on its own. You have to talk about currency with reference to something. And in the currency market, we're talking about the value of one currency with respect to another one. So it's a currency pair. And generally each currency has a three-letter symbol, and when you quote a currency pair, you just have two adjacent three-letter symbols. So for example, if you're talking about the price of €1 in terms of US dollars, you'll quote what's called euro dollar, which is the symbol EUR/USD. Similarly, if you're talking about the price of £1 sterling in terms of Japanese yen, so that's basically how many Japanese yen you'll need to buy £1 sterling, you look at the symbol GBP, which is pound sterling, Great British pounds, and JPY, which is Japanese yen. So out loud, this is referred to as sterling yen. So a lot of these symbols are quite difficult to pronounce if you just to read them out loud, because they have a lot of syllables, so they're shortened. So you talk about euro dollar or sterling yen, and there are similar sort of colloquialisms within the market. So when you talk about this six-letter symbol, the two currencies are referred to the base, which is the one on the left-hand side, and the term or the quote currency on the right-hand side. So let's consider euro dollar, and let's say euro dollar is currently trading at 1.3. So what that means is that you can either buy €1 for $1.3, or you could buy $1 for 1 divided by 1.3 euros, which is about 0.77 euros. So you can sort of consider this as a fraction as well, as another way of thinking about it. So you could say that euro dollar is equal to €1 divided by $1. And what I mean by that as a fraction is the value of €1 and the value of $1. And again, like numerically, the euro on its own is sort of meaningless as a concept. It's what its value is with respect to a different currency. So when it comes to writing out this fraction, you always put the first currency on the top and the second one on the bottom. And if you think about this for a second, you can see why this sort of makes sense, because the euro is more valuable than the US dollar, because as you see above, it takes 1.3 US dollars to buy €1. So the euro is more valuable than the dollar, which means if you have a fraction of euros over dollars, you'd expect the fraction to be greater than 1. So when it comes to quoting a currency, if we're talking about a particular currency, like the South African rand, for example, there's generally a convention which is traded. So if you want to access the market and get access to some South African rand, you'll look for one of the quoted and highly traded, highly liquid currency pairs, and that will be dollar rand, is how it's pronounced. So it's USDZAR or USDZAR sometimes. The reason we do this is because you can't just have every currency pair quoted. It'd be, I mean, you could, but it'd be an enormous number of currency pairs. So generally, what you have is the currencies that trade against a major currency, such as the US dollar or the euro. And then if you wanted to if you want to carry out a different trade, for example, you want to say exchange rand for, I don't know, Canadian dollar, you'll trade dollar rand, and then you'll also trade dollar CAD. That's the convention. So like I say, most currencies by convention would be quoted against the dollar. So here are some examples. There's dollar yen, which is USD JPY, dollar CAD, that's how the USD CAD symbol is said out loud, and that's the Canadian dollar it's referring to on the right hand side, and as I mentioned, dollar rand. There are some examples where this is not the case. There are a number of currencies which trade conventionally against the euro, and these are generally currencies in the European Economic Area or nearby. So we have things such as Euro Swiss, which is Euro CHF, which is the euro against the Swiss franc, and you've got Euro Stocky, which is the euro against the Swedish krona, and so on. Euro Noki, which is euro against the Norwegian krone. So, and there are plenty of others. So these are the examples, the main examples which trade. I think when it comes to currencies, you talk about highly liquid currencies, it's a continuous spectrum. So there's some which are highly liquid, such as euro dollar, and then less liquid, like Euro Swiss, and then Euro I don't know, Euro Stocky, and then you go down until you get to things like Euro RON, which is the euro against the Romanian leu. And then if you go beyond that and look at more sort of less well-traded currencies, they're very illiquid in the market. So there are other ones which do trade, such as the euro against the Ukrainian currency, but they're highly liquid. So these are sort of the ones I've listed here are some of the more liquid ones, some of the more liquid end of the spectrum. Okay, so one other example is sterling, which is slightly different. This is commonly traded both against the euro and the dollar, and so sterling dollar, GBP USD, is also colloquially called cable, and I think that refers to when trading first started across the Atlantic, the signals used to be transmitted via a cable under the Atlantic, and that's why it's called cable. And EUR GBP is called euro sterling, so that's the euro traded against sterling. So it's important to note that the base here is switched, so there is no convention. So in the case of cable, sterling is the base, and in the case of euro sterling, euro is the base. So that's just something to be aware of. So when you talk about these pairs which trade commonly against the dollar as their base, traded against the dollar, most currencies have the dollar as the base. So dollar rand, for example, dollar yen, dollar CAD, huge numbers of currencies basically. And if anything doesn't trade against the euro, will trade against the dollar with its base being the dollar. There are four exceptions though, four major exceptions, and they're listed here. That's euro dollar, sterling dollar, which is cable, Aussie dollar, and Kiwi dollar. And Aussie dollar is AUD USD, which refers to Australian dollar. NZD USD is the New Zealand dollar. And in these cases, the other currency is the base currency. And without exception, all euro-based pairs are quoted with euro as the base. So let's quickly talk about crosses. So if you have a currency pair which doesn't contain euros or dollars, it's generally considered a cross. So for example, we can talk about sterling yen, that's a cross. So if, for example, you know the exchange rate of sterling dollar and US dollar, then you can work out what sterling yen should be. So we can look at fractions and say GBP over JPY. We can say that that is equal to GBP over USD multiplied by USD over JPY, and the USD's cancel obviously. And then you can just multiply out the rates. So you can say 1.4 times 110 is 154. So that's how you do it, and that's in fact how you would trade it in the market. If you wanted to do a sterling yen trade, generally if you are, have access to the direct interbank market, you won't just be able to trade sterling yen. You may, but it's generally easier just to trade cable and then trade dollar yen. So one final thing is talk about precious metals, and the reason I mention these in this this video is because they trade in the same way as currencies actually, and often you'll find the currency desks have gold desks close by. So here are four of the major precious metals which are traded. Gold is by far the most liquid, but the other three are highly traded as well. There are others which trade, but they're a lot less liquid. And you'll notice that all of these precious metals, first of all, they start with an X, and I suppose that's just a convention to indicate they're a metal. And they are always quoted with respect to US dollars by convention. Although some crosses do trade. For example, gold Swiss trades because there is a reasonably large market within Switzerland for gold. And you'll notice that in this case, the metal is the base. So this sort of makes sense because if you're talking about, for example, gold dollar, you want the value of gold in a dollar. So these are all per ounce, so it's imperial. So you're talking about, if you're talking about XAU USD, that's the price of 1 ounce of gold in US dollars. So for example, it's $1,100 or $1,200 or whatever it is.